The life and enlightenment of the 24 Zen Patriarchs. Mahakasyapa. At the same time as the Buddha, Mahakasyapa was born into a Brahmana family in the land of Magadha. His father was named Amtrak. As a child, Mahakasyapa had a refined and elegant appearance, with golden skin that radiated light far and wide. A fortune teller examined him and said, "This child possesses exceptional merit from past lives and is destined to renounce the world." Hearing this, his parents were fearful and secretly decided to marry him to a beautiful woman to weaken his resolve. When he came of age, his parents began searching for a suitable bride, but Mahakasyapa consistently refused. Finally, under pressure, he declared, "I will only marry a woman whose skin is the same color as mine." His parents then had a golden statue made and sent it throughout the land to find a woman whose appearance matched the statue. They eventually found a girl who was exactly like him, and thus Mahakasyapa had to marry. However, in a past life during the time of the Buddha Vipassana, after the Buddha's nirvana, the people built a stupa to enshrine his relics. Within the stupa was placed a statue of the Buddha covered in gold leaf. Over time, the gold leaf on the statue began to wear away. At that time, Mahakasyapa, who was a goldsmith in that life, met a poor girl who had only one gold coin. She brought it to Mahakasyapa and asked him to use it to re-gild the Buddha's statue. Seeing her deep devotion, Mahakasyapa joyfully undertook the task, and the two vowed to be husband and wife in future lives as kindred spirits, without attachment to physical desires. As a result of this merit, they were both born with golden bodies for 91 lifetimes. After residing in the Brahma heavens, they were reborn in this world in a wealthy Brahmana family. Although they were married in this life, they lived as kindred spirits without any sexual desire. Later, both requested permission from their parents to renounce the world, which was granted. Mahakasyapa became a monk and practiced austere practices, Dhrtaka, in the mountains. One day, he heard a voice in the sky telling him that the Buddha had appeared in the world and he should seek his teachings. Mahakasyapa immediately went to the Bamboo Grove Monastery and respectfully bowed to the Buddha. The Buddha said, "Well done, bhikkhu. Come here and shave off your beard and hair." Mahakasyapa immediately shaved his beard and hair, received the bhikkhu precepts, and donned the monastic robes. From that moment on, he followed the Buddha, deeply understanding the Dharma and diligently practicing without any laziness until he attained arhatship. There was an occasion when Mahakasyapa approached the Buddha from afar. The assembly of bhikkhus who were sitting around the Buddha saw Mahakasyapa dressed in tattered robes, looking emaciated, and secretly harbored disdain for him. Knowing this, the Buddha called out, "Mahakasyapa, come here. I will share half of my seat with you." However, Mahakasyapa hesitated to sit. The Buddha then said to the bhikkhus, "I possess great compassion, meditative absorption, and countless virtues to adorn myself. Bhikkhu Mahakasyapa is the same. Therefore, I share half of my seat with him." The bhikkhus abandoned their arrogance and secretly revered him. On another occasion, the Buddha was at Mount Dhrtaka, holding up a lotus flower. The entire assembly was bewildered, except for Mahakasyapa, who smiled. The Buddha said, "I have the treasury of the true Dharma I, the wondrous mind of nirvana, the true form of the formless, and the subtle Dharma door, which is not established in words and is transmitted outside the scriptures. I entrust it to you. You must skillfully guard and transmit this true Dharma, ensuring that it continues unbroken until it reaches Ananda." Before entering nirvana, the world-honored one, at the Dada Stupa, called Mahakasyapa to share half of his seat and wrapped the Sanghati robe around him. Despite his advanced age, the Buddha repeatedly advised Mahakasyapa, "You are old now. You should stay in one place and accept offerings from donors, rather than going through the hardship of alms rounds." However, Mahakasyapa replied, "Although I am old and weak, I dare not stay in one place to accept offerings from donors, for I fear that future bhikkhus may say, 'The senior disciple of the Buddha once stayed in one place and accepted offerings, and thus become lax.'" When the Buddha entered nirvana at Kusinagara, Mahakasyapa was in the Stavira cave on Mount Dhrtaka. Upon hearing the news of the Buddha's passing, he and 500 disciples hurried to Kusinagara. Upon arriving, they found the Buddha had already been placed in the golden coffin. Overcome with sorrow, the master and disciples circled the coffin 3 times and then bowed to the Buddha. At that moment, the Buddha's feet extended out of the coffin to console Mahakasyapa. He gently touched the Buddha's feet, filled with deep sadness. After the Buddha's cremation, Mahakasyapa declared to the bhikkhus, the relics of the Buddha should be entrusted to the heavens and humans to build stupas as fields of merit. As bhikkhus, our responsibility is to compile the scriptures so they may be preserved for future generations. Thus, 7 days after the Buddha's nirvana, Mahakasyapa convened 500 great arhats at Mount Gurukhuda in the Stavira cave to compile the scriptures. However, Ananda was not invited to the assembly because he had not yet eradicated all defilements. Saddened, Ananda devoted himself to meditation throughout the night, and by dawn, he attained arhatship. Eradicating all defilements, he was then invited to join the assembly. Mahakasyapa addressed the assembly, Bhikkhu Ananda has the best memory, often attending to the Tathagata, remembering the Dharma taught by the Buddha without missing a word, just like water poured into a vessel without spilling a drop. Therefore, I invite him to compile the Sutra and Vinaya Pitakas. The entire assembly joyfully agreed. Mahakasyapa presided over this compilation assembly. After the completion of the compilation and fulfilling his duties and guiding beings, Mahakasyapa, feeling that his old age had weakened him greatly, called Ananda to him and said, when the Tathagata was about to enter nirvana, he instructed me to entrust the treasury of the true Dharma to you. Now I'm about to leave this world, and it is time to pass it on to you. You must skillfully guard it and ensure it does not cease. Remembering the Buddha's instructions to preserve the Buddha's robe and bowl until the time of Maitreya's appearance, Mahakasyapa prepared to enter the Kesoku mountain in meditation. He bid farewell to King Ajatasattu and his relatives, then entered the Kesoku mountain, spread out a grass mat, and sat down in meditation, entering nirvana in a state of peace. To Ananda, Ananda was born 30 years after the Buddha, in the Sakya clan in Kapilavastu. He was the younger brother of Devadatta and a cousin of the Buddha Shakyamuni. As a child, Ananda displayed many auspicious signs and possessed remarkable intelligence. At the age of 25, he requested to join the monastic order under the Buddha. One day, the Buddha needed to choose an attendant. Many members of the assembly volunteered, but the Buddha did not accept any of them. Finally, the Venerable Mahakasyapa, who was deep in meditation, understood that the Buddha desired Ananda to be his attendant. The assembly sent Venerable Mahakasyapa, Sariputta, and others to ask Ananda to take on the role. Ananda refused multiple times, but after much insistence from the venerable elders, he agreed to become the Buddha's attendant under 3 conditions. 1. He would not accept food offerings made to the Buddha unless he was specifically invited. 2. He would not wear the Buddha's discarded robes. 3. He would not accompany the Buddha during private moments. The world-honored one not only agreed to Ananda's conditions, but also praised him for his wisdom in anticipating future issues. Thus, Ananda served as the Buddha's attendant for 25 years. One day, as Ananda returned to the monastery after alms rounds, he found the Buddha's aunt, Mahapajapati Gotami, standing at the door, weeping. Her clothes were dusty, her feet were muddy, and she appeared sorrowful. Ananda approached her to ask why she was distressed. He learned that she had come from afar to request ordination from the Buddha, but despite her repeated pleas, the Buddha had refused. Moved by her plight, Ananda went to the Buddha and requested on her behalf that she be allowed to ordain. The Buddha initially refused, but Ananda persisted until the Buddha finally agreed. This event marked the beginning of the ordination of women, with Ananda playing a crucial role in paving the way. The Buddha once praised Ananda, saying, "Among the attendants of the Buddhas of the past, none surpass Ananda, and among the attendants of the Buddhas of the future, none will surpass Ananda." The Buddha also commended Ananda for possessing 8 unprecedented qualities. Sanakavasa lived during the 1st century after the Buddha's nirvana. He was born into the Vatsa clan in the kingdom of Mathura, with his father named Lamthang and his mother named Kausalya. He remained in his mother's womb for 6 years before being born. It was said in India that whenever the Thunganaka grass grew, a saint was born. When Sanakavasa was born, this grass also sprouted, so his parents named him Sanakavasa. Initially, he became a disciple of a sage in the snowy mountains, practicing asceticism and gaining supernatural powers. However, after meeting the Venerable Ananda, he returned to the true Dharma. Ananda said to him, "In the past, the Tathagata entrusted the great Dharma eye to Mahakasyapa. Mahakasyapa passed it to me, and now I'm about to enter nirvana, so I entrust it to you. You must carefully preserve and transmit it without letting it be lost." After receiving the Dharma from Ananda, Sanakavasa went to the Uruvilva forest, where he built a monastery and diligently spread the Buddha's teachings. When the Buddha was still alive, he once passed through this forest and said to Ananda, "After my nirvana, about 100 years later, there will be a monk named Sanakavasa who will spread the true Dharma in this forest." Seeing that his mission of spreading the Dharma was complete, Sanakavasa transmitted the Dharma eye to his disciple Upagupta. He then went to the White Elephant Mountain in the southern part of the Khotan kingdom to enter nirvana. While in deep meditation, he perceived that Upagupta's 500 disciples were often lazy and disrespectful. Sanakavasa decided to visit them. When he arrived, Upagupta was not present, and Sanakavasa sat on Upagupta's seat. The disciples, not knowing who Sanakavasa was, were annoyed and disrespectful. They reported this to Upagupta. Upon his return, Upagupta recognized his teacher and immediately paid his respects, but the disciples still harbored a disrespectful attitude. Sanakavasa pointed to the sky with his right hand, and fragrant milk began to flow down. He asked Upagupta, "Do you know what this signifies?" Upagupta replied, "I do not know." Upagupta then entered deep meditation to investigate but could not understand. He asked, "What is the significance of this auspicious sign?" Sanakavasa explained, "This is the long Funtan Samadhi. There are 500 more types of Samadhi like this that you do not yet know. The Samadhi of the Tathagata cannot be known by a Pratyeka Buddha. The Samadhi of a Pratyeka Buddha cannot be known by an Arhat. The Samadhi of my teacher Ananda, I could not know. How could you know my Samadhi? This Samadhi is the mind that neither arises nor ceases, established in great compassion and mutual respect. Only by cultivating such a mind can one understand it." Upagupta. At the end of the 1st century after the Buddha's nirvana, Upagupta was born into the Sudra caste in the kingdom of Shravasti. His father was named Shanta, and before Upagupta's birth, his father dreamt of a golden sun appearing in their home. As a child, Upagupta was handsome, kind-hearted, and exceptionally intelligent. At the age of 12, he met the patriarch Sanakavasa, who visited his home and taught him a method for cultivating mindfulness. The method involved dropping a black stone into a jar whenever he had a bad thought, and a white stone whenever he had a good thought. At the end of each month, he would examine the jar to see if there were more black or white stones, striving to correct his behavior if there were more black stones. Initially, the black stones were numerous, but gradually they balanced out, and eventually, the white stones became more frequent. At 17 years old, Upagupta asked Patriarch Sanakavasa for permission to become a monk. The Patriarch asked, "How old are you?" Upagupta replied, "I am 17 years old." The Patriarch asked again, "Is your body 17 years old, or is your nature 17 years old?" Upagupta then questioned back, "Your hair is gray, but is it your hair that is gray, or your mind that is gray?" The Patriarch responded, "My hair is gray, but my mind is not gray." Upagupta replied, "Similarly, my body is 17 years old, but my nature is not 17 years old." The Patriarch, pleased with the answer, agreed to ordain him as a monk. At 20, Upagupta received full ordination and attained enlightenment. The Patriarch then said to him, "In the past, the world-honored one entrusted the supreme Dharma to Mahakasyapa, who then passed it to Ananda, my teacher. Ananda transmitted it to me, and now I pass it to you. You must diligently protect and continue this Dharma without letting it be lost." Listen to this verse. "What is neither Dharma nor mind is neither mind nor Dharma. When discussing the mind Dharma, that Dharma is not mind Dharma." When Upagupta arrived in the kingdom of Mathura, he converted many people to Buddhism, with many attaining the fruits of the path. During his teachings, celestial beings scattered flowers, and the earth trembled, even disturbing the palace of Mara, the demon king. Fearing that Buddhism would flourish and his followers would be destroyed, Mara used all his powers to disrupt the Dharma. He sent a group of heavenly maidens to distract Upagupta's audience. Sensing this, Upagupta entered deep meditation to understand the situation. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Mara placed a precious garland around Upagupta's neck. However, when Upagupta emerged from meditation, he used his spiritual power to transform 3 dead bodies, a human, a dog, and a snake, into a beautiful garland. He then kindly offered it to Mara, saying, "You kindly offered me this precious garland, so now I return this beautiful garland to you as a gesture of mutual exchange." Mara, delighted, put the garland around his neck, but it quickly turned into a rotting, foul-smelling corpse covered in maggots. Horrified, Mara tried to remove it, but even with all his powers, he could not. In desperation, Mara went to the heaven of the desire realm to seek help from the gods, but to no avail. One by one, he sought assistance from the gods in the Brahma realm, but they all said, "This garland was created by a disciple of the Buddha. We are still bound by worldly defilements and cannot remove it." Mara then asked, "What can I do to remove it?" The gods recited a verse, "If one falls to the ground, one must rise from the ground. If one seeks to rise away from the ground, there is no such principle." Mara heeded this advice and returned to Upagupta, sincerely bowing and repenting. Upagupta said, "The previous sages instructed me to subdue you. However, if you repent and sincerely follow the Buddha's teachings, you will be protected from falling into evil paths." Mara, overjoyed, requested, "Venerable sir, please remove this rotting garland for me." Upagupta replied, "First, you must kneel, clasp your hands, and recite the threefold refuge 3 times. Mara did as instructed, and the garland of rotting corpses disappeared. Overjoyed, Mara bowed to Upagupta and recited a verse, "I bow to the one in perfect samadhi, endowed with the 10 powers and great compassion. Now I sincerely make an offering, may there be no more weakness and inferiority." After taking refuge in the triple gem, Upagupta asked Mara, "You used to see the Tathagata, can you now manifest him for me to see?" Mara replied, "It is not difficult to show you this past vision, but I ask that you do not bow when you see it." Mara then entered the forest and disappeared. Moments later, the Buddha emerged from the forest, with 1,250 monks following him in a majestic procession. As soon as Upagupta saw this, he instinctively bowed, causing the vision to vanish. During his time of spreading the Dharma, Upagupta would place a bamboo token in a stone hut for each person who deeply understood the Buddha's teachings. The hut measured 18 cubits long and 12 cubits wide. Over time, the hut became filled with bamboo tokens. Eventually, Upagupta met a lay disciple named Dhrtaka and transmitted the Dharma to him. Dhrtaka's father had dreamt of a golden sun appearing in their home, so Upagupta gave him the Dharma name, Dhrtaka. With his successor in place and his mission fulfilled, Upagupta bid farewell to the assembly, entered the stone hut, and peacefully passed away in seated meditation. Dhrtaka and the disciples gathered the bamboo tokens from the stone hut to use as fuel for the cremation pyre. After cremating Upagupta's body, they collected his relics and built a stupa to venerate them. Dhrtaka, at the beginning of the 2nd century after the Buddha's nirvana, Dhrtaka, also known as Dhrtaka, was born in the kingdom of Magadha. Before his birth, his father dreamed of a golden sun appearing in their home, shining brightly throughout. In the dream, a large mountain adorned with 7 treasures appeared in front of the house, with a clear stream of water flowing from the top and spreading in all directions. After this dream, Dhrtaka was born. When he met the patriarch Upagupta, he recounted his father's dream and asked for its interpretation. The patriarch explained, "The jeweled mountain represents my body, the flowing water is the inexhaustible Dharma, and the golden sun appearing in your house signifies your destined entry into the path of the Dharma. The light shining everywhere represents your superior wisdom." Hearing this explanation, Dhrtaka was overjoyed and recited a verse, "Majestic mountain of 7 treasures, the wisdom stream flows continuously, transforming into the taste of true Dharma, able to guide those with affinity." The patriarch Upagupta also responded with a verse, "I transmit the Dharma to you. You shall manifest great wisdom. The sun rises in your home, illuminating heaven and earth." After hearing the verse, Dhrtaka requested to follow the patriarch and become a monk. Seeing his quick wit and profound understanding, the patriarch was pleased and accepted him as a disciple. One day, the patriarch called Dhrtaka and said, "The Tathagata transmitted the great Dharma I treasury to Mahakasyapa, who passed it down to Ananda, and then it was transmitted to me. Now I transmit it to you. Listen to this verse. The mind itself is originally the mind. The original mind is without Dharma. With Dharma there is the original mind. Without the mind there is no original Dharma." Dhrtaka sincerely received the true Dharma. Later, he traveled to central India to teach and spread the Dharma. There, he encountered 8,000 great sages under the leadership of the great sage Vyasa. Upon hearing of Dhrtaka's arrival, Vyasa gathered his followers to pay respects to him. When they met, Vyasa said, "In the past, I was born in the Brahma heaven alongside you. I received the teachings of sage Asita and practiced according to the sage's teachings, while you followed the teachings of the Buddha's disciples in meditation practice. Since then, we have been separated for 6 lifetimes." Dhrtaka replied, "What you have said is true. However, where will your practice as a sage ultimately lead you?" Vyasa responded, "Though I have not yet encountered the ultimate saint, sage Asita prophesied that 6 lifetimes after, I would be liberated through the guidance of a fellow student. Now that we have met again, it seems that this prophecy is being fulfilled." Dhrtaka then said, "Since you understand this, you must renounce the world and become a monk. The path of the sage is a lesser path that cannot lead to liberation. I have been teaching the Dharma for a long time and am now ready to rest. If you truly aspire to the great Dharma, you should not delay." Overjoyed, Vyasa immediately asked to be ordained. Dhrtaka initiated him as a monk and gave him full ordination. Seeing their leader's actions, the other sages were dissatisfied and whispered among themselves, "Is Dhrtaka truly capable of being our teacher, that we should follow him into ordination?" Knowing their thoughts, Dhrtaka decided to inspire faith in them. He emitted a brilliant light, walked through the air as if walking on solid ground, and manifested a jeweled canopy that covered all the sages. From his fingers, fragrant milk flowed, which transformed into a lotus flower, and from within the lotus, a Buddha appeared. Witnessing these miraculous feats, the sages bowed their heads and requested ordination. Dhrtaka joyfully accepted them as disciples. After fulfilling his mission of teaching, Dhrtaka transmitted the Dharma to Vyasa and then entered nirvana. Vyasa and the disciples cremated Dhrtaka's body, collected his relics and built a stupa on Mount Bantra to venerate him. Miccaka, at the beginning of the 3rd century after the Buddha's nirvana, there was a master named Miccaka, whose origins were in central India, though his family name is unknown. He, along with a group of sages, took ordination from the patriarch Dhrtaka. Afterward, through his practice, Miccaka attained enlightenment. As he was nearing the end of his life, Patriarch Dhrtaka summoned him and said, "In the past, the Tathagata secretly transmitted the great Dharma I to Mahakasyapa, and it has been passed down through the generations to me. Now I transmit it to you. You must protect and pass on this Dharma without interruption. Listen to my verse. To fully comprehend the original mind Dharma, no non-Dharma. To realize and not realize are the same. No mind, no Dharma." After receiving the Dharma, Miccaka traveled to various places, teaching and guiding sentient beings according to their capacities. One day, while traveling to northern India, he noticed a golden cloud hovering over a city. He turned to the people nearby and said, "This is the auspicious sign of the Mahayana. Within this city there will be a great person who will succeed me in the Dharma." Entering the city, he went to the market and encountered a man holding a wine jar. The man approached Miccaka and asked, "Venerable sir, from where have you come, and where are you going?" Miccaka replied, "I have come from my mind and have no fixed destination." The man then asked, "Do you know what I am holding?" "This is a container for something that destroys purity." Miccaka responded, "Do you know who I am?" The man replied, "I do not know, but knowing is not me." Miccaka then asked, "Tell me your name and lineage, and I will reveal your past life to you." The man recited a verse, "I was born in this country, and I remember days long past. My lineage is Faladoa, and my name is Mitra." Hearing this, Miccaka recalled a previous encounter and said, "My teacher Dhrtaka often spoke of this. Long ago, when the Tathagata was traveling through northern India, He told Ananda, 300 years after my nirvana, in this country, there will be a saint born with the name Buddhamitra from the Phala Doa lineage. He will be the 7th patriarch of Zen. This prophecy was for you. You should now ordain as a monk. Buddhamitra immediately placed the wine jar down, bowed to Miccaka, and said, I remember that in a past life, I often made offerings to the Buddha, including a precious seat. The Tathagata predicted that in a future life during this fortunate eon, I would attain the Dharma and become the 7th patriarch. This meeting is the fruition of that past connection. I humbly ask you, Venerable One, to compassionately guide me to liberation. Miccaka then shaved his head and ordained him, giving him full ordination and the complete Dharma. As Miccaka grew older and his mission of teaching was fulfilled, he transmitted the true Dharma to Buddhamitra. After doing so, Miccaka entered nirvana. Buddhamitra and his disciples gathered Miccaka's relics, placed them in a jeweled urn, and built a high stupa to enshrine them, where people could make offerings and pay their respects. Vasumitra. At the end of the 3rd century after the Buddha's nirvana, Vasumitra from the Phala Doa family was born and raised in northern India. During his time as a layperson, he would often dress in clean clothes, carry a wine jar, and stroll through villages, sometimes reciting poetry and playing the flute. His behavior was so unconventional that people often thought he was mad. However, after meeting Patriarch Dhrtaka, who reminded him of the Tathagata's prophecy, Vasumitra awakened to his past life connection, threw away the wine jar, and vowed to become a monk. Under the guidance of the Patriarch, he studied diligently and attained realization of the mind's essence. One day, Patriarch Dhrtaka called him and said, My work is nearly complete, and I now pass the treasury of the true Dharma to you. You must guard it diligently and ensure it is not lost. Listen to this verse. No mind, nothing can be attained. To speak of attaining is not the Dharma. If you realize the mind is not the mind, then you understand the Dharma of the mind. After Patriarch Dhrtaka entered nirvana, Vasumitra traveled widely, spreading the true Dharma. When he arrived in the kingdom of Kapimala, he ascended the Dharma seat to give teachings. A learned scholar approached and loudly proclaimed, I am Buddhanandi, and today I challenge you to a debate on the meaning of the Dharma. Vasumitra responded, O noble one, if you debate, there is no meaning. If there is meaning, there is no debate. If you think of debating meaning, it is not the true meaning. Buddhanandi, realizing the profundity of Vasumitra's words, felt deep respect and said, I wish to pursue the path and taste the nectar of Dharma. Moved by compassion, Vasumitra ordained him and before long transmitted the Dharma to him. With a successor in place, Vasumitra prepared to enter nirvana. He entered the state of loving kindness, metta, and then entered the final meditative state, samadhi, to pass away. At that moment, Indra, Brahma, and other deities descended to pay homage and recited this verse. In this fortunate eon, the holy lineage of the patriarchs, you are the 7th in line, Venerable One, in your compassion, please teach us the way to Buddhahood. Vasumitra emerged from samadhi and said to them, the Dharma I have realized is beyond existence. If you wish to understand the Buddha's realm, you must go beyond concepts of existence and non-existence. After these words, Vasumitra re-entered samadhi and passed into nirvana, displaying the signs of final departure. The deities, hearing his teachings, rejoiced, scattered heavenly flowers, and paid their respects. Buddhanandi and his disciples performed the cremation, collected his relics, and built a stupa for people to make offerings and honor his memory. 8. Buddhanandi. At the beginning of the 4th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Buddhanandi from the Gautama family was born in the kingdom of Kamala. As a child, a flesh protuberance stood out on the top of his head, often emitting an intermingling 5-colored radiance. He was exceptionally intelligent, able to remember anything after reading it just once. At the age of 14, he vowed to become a monk and devoted himself to practicing pure conduct. When Patriarch Buddhamitra arrived in Kamala, Buddhanandi engaged in debate with him and, being deeply impressed, requested to become his disciple. As the Patriarch neared nirvana, he summoned Buddhanandi and entrusted him with the sacred teachings. The treasury of the true Dharma of the Tathagata, I now pass on to you. You must propagate it and ensure it is never lost. Listen to this verse. The mind is like the vastness of space. and the Dharma is akin to that space. When you realize the emptiness of space, there is no Dharma nor non-Dharma. Buddhanandi respectfully accepted this transmission. After attaining the Dharma, he led his disciples and spread the teachings widely. One day, while traveling through the kingdom of Deha, he passed by the house of a man named Vaisala. Suddenly he saw a white light emanating from the roof and ascending into the sky. He pointed it out to his followers and said, "In this house there is a great sage who, though he neither speaks nor walks, is truly a vessel of the great vehicle. Although he does not leave the house, he knows how to transcend defilements. This person is destined to inherit the Dharma from me and will greatly strengthen the Buddha's teachings. He will lead 500 people to attain the holy fruits." After speaking, a wealthy man from the house came out and asked, "Venerable sir, what brings you here?" The patriarch replied, "I am searching for an attendant, not for anything else." The wealthy man said, "There is no one special here, only my son, whose name is Buddhamitra. He cannot speak or walk, and he is already 50 years old. If you need him, I am willing to give him to you." The patriarch responded, "The son you speak of is precisely the person I am looking for." The wealthy man then invited the patriarch into the house. Upon seeing him, Buddhamitra immediately stood up, put his hands together, and recited this verse, "Parents are not truly my kin. Who then is my closest kin? The Buddhas are not my path. What then is the ultimate path?" The patriarch replied with a verse, "Your words align with your mind. Parents cannot compare. Your conduct aligns with the path. The Buddhas themselves are the mind. Seeking a Buddha with form is not the same as you. If you know your true mind, there is neither union nor separation." Hearing this verse, Buddhamitra was filled with joy, descended from his seat, and took 7 steps forward, earnestly requesting ordination. The patriarch accepted him as a disciple, immediately convening a gathering of virtuous monks to conduct the full ordination ceremony. Afterward, the patriarch advised Buddhamitra, "The eye of the Tathagata's Dharma has been secretly transmitted through the generations to me. I now pass it on to you. You must propagate it and ensure it is never lost. Listen to this verse. Space has no inside or outside. The Dharma of the mind is the same. If you understand the nature of space, you realize the truth of thusness." Buddhamitra, honored to receive the Dharma, was overjoyed and recited this verse in praise. "My master among the Zen Patriarchs now becomes the 8th. He teaches countless beings, all of whom attain arhatship." After transmitting the Dharma, the patriarch prepared for nirvana. On that day, while seated on his seat, he peacefully passed away. He had led 500 disciples to attain the second fruit of sainthood. The assembly conducted the cremation of his remains, collected his relics, and built a stupa to enshrine and honor them. 9. Buddhamitra. At the end of the 4th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Buddhamitra, from the Vaisala family in the kingdom of Deha, was born. From birth until the age of 50, he had never spoken a word or taken a single step. His parents were puzzled and questioned why he was like this. They brought him to the patriarch Buddhanandi, who explained his past life. This child was very intelligent in his past life. In the Buddha's Dharma, out of great compassion and a desire to benefit sentient beings, he often made this vow: "If I am born anywhere, may I not be bound by familial ties, and may I be liberated according to my wholesome karma." His silence symbolizes the non-dual nature of the way, and his lack of movement represents the Dharma's transcendence of coming and going. Hearing this explanation from the patriarch, his parents' doubts were completely dispelled, and they happily allowed him to follow the patriarch and ordain as a monk. After receiving the Dharma, Buddhamitra traveled and spread the teachings extensively, eventually reaching central India. There, he encountered a wealthy man named Sugata, who had a son named Nanda. Sugata brought his son to meet the patriarch, and after paying his respects, said, "This boy remained in his mother's womb for nearly 60 years, so I named him Nanda." A sage once observed him and said, "This child undoubtedly has extraordinary qualities and will become a great vessel for the Dharma, eventually encountering a bodhisattva who will guide him to enlightenment. It is by this fortunate karma that we have now met you. I wish for him to ordain under you and learn the way." The patriarch gladly accepted Nanda, ordaining and granting him full precepts. During the ordination ceremony, a cool, radiant light suddenly shone over Nanda. Seeing that his work of teaching and transforming was nearing completion, the patriarch called Nanda to him and instructed, "The treasury of the true Dharma eye of the Tathagata I now pass on to you. You must protect and transmit it without allowing it to be lost. Remember my teaching and listen to this verse. True reality originally has no name, yet names reveal true reality. When you receive the true Dharma, it is neither true nor false." After reciting this verse, the patriarch entered into deep samadhi and manifested the appearance of nirvana. The devas played heavenly music as an offering. Nanda, along with the other disciples, performed the cremation ceremony with fragrant oil and sandalwood, and after the cremation, they collected the relics and enshrined them in a stupa at Nalanda Monastery. Parsvika, at the beginning of the 5th century, after the Buddha's nirvana, there was a monk named Parsvika, whose secular name was Nanda, from central India. His mother carried him in her womb for 60 years before he was born. Before his birth, his father had a dream of a large white elephant carrying a precious seat with a shining jewel on its back, entering their house through the door and illuminating the entire place. Awakened from the dream, his father found that Parsvika was born. Later, Parsvika met the patriarch Buddhamitra, who guided him to ordain as a monk. After his ordination, Parsvika diligently studied and practiced, to the extent that he would forget to eat and sleep, spending his days and nights without ever lying down. Because of this, he was known as Hip Tonja, which means the venerable with hips unattached to the mat. After receiving the true Dharma, Parsvika traveled widely, teaching according to people's capacities. When he arrived at the kingdom of Kashika, he rested under a large tree. Pointing to the ground, he said to his followers, "When this land turns golden, a sage will come to join us." As soon as he finished speaking, the ground turned golden. Shortly thereafter, a wealthy young man named Punyayasas approached and stood before him with joined palms. Parsvika asked, "Where do you come from?" Punyayasas replied, "My mind does not come from anywhere." "Where do you reside?" "My mind does not reside anywhere." "Are you not determined?" "Neither are the Buddhas." "You are not a Buddha." "Neither are the Buddhas." Upon hearing this, Parsvika recited the following verse, "This land has turned to gold, indicating the arrival of a sage. Sitting under the Bodhi tree, the flower of enlightenment will fully bloom." Punyayasas responded with his own verse, "The master sits on golden ground, always speaking the true meaning, turning his light to shine on me, guiding me into samadhi." Recognizing Punyayasas' deep aspiration for the way, Parsvika ordained him as a monk and conferred upon him the full precepts. One day, Parsvika called Punyayasas and said, "The treasury of the true Dharma eye of the Tathagata I now pass on to you. You must skillfully transmit it without allowing it to be lost. Listen to this verse. The true essence is inherently true. Because of truth there is reason. Understanding the true Dharma, there is no going nor staying." After transmitting the Dharma, Parsvika, while seated, manifested various signs and then entered nirvana. After cremating his body, an innumerable number of relics appeared, which his followers carefully wrapped in cloth and brought back to venerate and make offerings. The Letzer to this. In the middle of the 5th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Punyayasas was born into the Gautama clan in the kingdom of Kashika. His father was Bao Sheng, who had 7 sons, with Punyayasas being the youngest. From a young age, he displayed a calm and serene mind, free from both agitation and distraction. He often said to his brothers, "If I ever meet a great sage sitting in the Dharma hall teaching the way, I will surely go there, approach him, and rejoice in his presence." When the patriarch Parsvika arrived in his kingdom to revive the Buddha's teachings, Punyayasas immediately joined the assembly. Noticing his quick wit and logical speech, the patriarch ordained him. After receiving the Dharma from Patriarch Parsvika, Punyayasas devoted himself wholeheartedly to the practice and took the responsibility of teaching and spreading the Dharma seriously. His virtue became widely known, and countless disciples gathered around him, with 500 of them attaining sainthood. Later, Punyayasas traveled to the kingdom of Varanasi, where a wealthy elder joined his assembly. He asked his disciples, "Do you know who this newcomer is?" Long ago, the Buddha prophesied that nearly 600 years after his passing, a great sage named Asvaghosha would be born in Varanasi, teach the Dharma in Kashika, defeat other doctrines, and liberate countless beings. When Asvaghosha heard Punyayasas speak his name, he silently praised him, stepped forward, bowed, and asked, "I wish to know the Buddha. What is the Buddha?" Punyayasas replied, "If you wish to know the Buddha, not knowing is correct. If I do not know the Buddha, how can I know what is correct? If you do not know the Buddha, why do you know what is not correct?" This indeed is the meaning of the saw. That is the meaning of the tree. What do you mean by the meaning of the saw? You and I are equally divided. And what do you mean by the meaning of the tree? You have been cut by me. At that moment, Asvaghosha realized the profound meaning of Punyayasas' words and joyfully requested to be ordained. Punyayasas ordained him and conferred upon him the full precepts. Of those who were ordained by Punyayasas, 200 attained the fruit of arhatship, and countless others developed deep faith in the three jewels. Seeing that his time for teaching was nearing completion, Punyayasas called Asvaghosha and instructed him, "You should turn the wheel of the Dharma and become the 12th patriarch." Long ago, the Tathagata entrusted the great Dharma treasury to Patriarch Mahakasyapa, who passed it down through the generations. Now I pass it on to you, and you must continue the transmission. Listen to this verse. Delusion and enlightenment are like concealment and revelation. Light and dark are never apart. Now I entrust to you the Dharma of concealment and revelation. It is neither one nor two. After transmitting the Dharma to Asvaghosha, Punyayasas manifested various miraculous powers and then quietly entered nirvana. Asvaghosha and his disciples built a stupa to enshrine and venerate his remains. 12 Asvaghosha. At the end of the 5th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Bodhisattva Asvaghosha, also known as Gongshung, was born in the kingdom of Varanasi. It is said that when he was born, the horses in the stables neighed loudly. Hence he was named Asvaghosha, which means horse neighing. Another account suggests that whenever Asvaghosha preached the Dharma, the horses nearby would quietly listen, and after he finished, they would neigh loudly, earning him the name. Before he became a monk, Asvaghosha was a renowned debater, with his fame spreading both domestically and internationally. After receiving ordination and the transmission of the mind seal from the Patriarch Punyayasas, he became famous as a brilliant Dharma preacher. He defeated many heretical doctrines and became the one who reignited the torch of Mahayana Buddhism at the beginning of the 6th century after the Buddha's nirvana. While spreading the Dharma in the kingdom of Kashika, his light of Dharma shone even brighter. One day, an old and frail man came to his assembly to listen to his teaching, but suddenly collapsed. Asvaghosha remarked to the assembly, "This is an extraordinary event, and there will be a strange sign." The old man then vanished, and suddenly from the ground, a beautiful woman with a golden body emerged. She pointed to Asvaghosha and recited a verse. "I bow to the venerable elder. Now you receive the Buddha's prophecy. Today, in this place, you will liberate beings from birth and death." After reciting the verse, she disappeared in an instant. Asvaghosha told the assembly, "Soon, an opponent from an external sect will come to challenge me." Shortly after, a violent storm with heavy rain and wind arose, darkening the sky. Asvaghosha said, "This is a sign that the heretics are coming. I will dispel them." He then pointed to the sky, and a large golden dragon appeared, its divine presence causing the heretical forces to dissipate. 7 days later, a worm was found lurking under Asvaghosha's seat. He picked it up, showed it to the assembly, and said, "This worm is the disguised form of a heretic, hiding here to secretly listen to my teachings." He threw the worm away, commanding, "Go immediately." But the worm, terrified, did not move. Asvaghosha reassured it, saying, "I will not harm you. Show your true form." The heretic then revealed his original form and bowed in repentance. Asvaghosha asked, "What is your name? How many disciples do you have?" The heretic replied, "My name is Kapimala, and I have about 3,000 disciples." Asvaghosha asked, "What is the extent of your magical abilities?" The heretic replied, "I can transform into an ocean. This is not difficult." Asvaghosha then asked, "Can you transform the nature of the ocean?" The heretic, not understanding, replied, "I cannot comprehend such a statement." Asvaghosha explained, "The nature of the ocean is the basis for the existence of mountains, rivers, and the earth. The practice of samadhi and the 6 supernatural powers arise from this. Hearing this profound teaching, the heretic was filled with faith, and along with his 3,000 disciples requested to be ordained. Asvaghosha ordained them all, and he summoned 500 saints to perform the full ordination ceremony. Asvaghosha then said to the new monks, "You are now directed towards Bodhi and will become holy beings." Kapimala indeed received the precepts, emitted a radiant light, and a strange fragrance filled the air. One day Asvaghosha called Kapimala and said, "The great Dharma treasury of the Tathagata, which has been transmitted through the patriarchs, I now pass on to you. You must spread it without allowing it to end." Listen to this verse. Manifestation and concealment are originally this Dharma. Light and darkness are fundamentally not two. Now I transmit to you the awakened Dharma, neither taking nor discarding. After transmitting the Dharma, Asvaghosha entered Samadhi and manifested the appearance of Nirvana. Kapimala and the assembly placed his body in a shrine. Asvaghosha was the 12th patriarch of the Zen lineage and also a great teacher who illuminated the Mahayana teachings. He authored 3 treatises, The Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, The Great Doctrine's Profound Text, and 50 verses on the Master and the Teachings. The most renowned of these is The Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, which continues to be studied in Mahayana Buddhist countries to this day. Kapimala. At the beginning of the 6th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Kapimala, born in the kingdom of Kashika, initially followed a heretical path and was skilled in various magical arts, amassing a following of 3,000 disciples. When he came to challenge Asvaghosha, he was subdued by the patriarch and, along with his disciples, converted and decided to become a monk. Asvaghosha ordained him and later transmitted the mind seal to him. After receiving the transmission of the mind seal, Kapimala traveled to various places, spreading the Dharma. Eventually, he reached Western India, where the crown prince named Vairasya held deep admiration for him. The prince invited Kapimala and his assembly to the palace for offerings, but Kapimala declined, saying, "The Buddha prohibited monks from associating closely with kings and powerful families, so I cannot accept your invitation." The prince then said, "Venerable sir, to the north of this city lies a large mountain with a quiet cave that is far from worldly distractions, an ideal place for meditation. However, the cave is inhabited by snakes and fierce animals, but I trust in your great virtue to transform them." Kapimala agreed and led his disciples to the mountain. Upon reaching it, they encountered a giant serpent, nearly a mile long, glaring at them. Kapimala continued walking forward without paying any attention to the snake. When he reached the southern foot of the mountain, the snake coiled around him, but Kapimala remained unfazed. Shortly after, the serpent slithered away. Kapimala then realized that his disciples had scattered in fear, so he proceeded alone to the cave. Suddenly, an old man dressed in white emerged from the cave and respectfully bowed to Kapimala. Kapimala asked, "Where are you from?" The old man replied, "I was once a monk who loved solitude. When novice monks came to ask questions, I became angry. As a result of that karma, I was reborn as a snake in this cave for the past 1,000 years. Upon seeing you, a saintly figure, I have come to pay my respects." Kapimala then asked, "Is there anyone else living on this mountain? What path do they follow? Show me the way." The old man replied, 10 miles north of here, there is a large tree under which 500 sages reside, led by a man named Nagarjuna, who often teaches them. I frequently go there to listen." Kapimala waited for his disciples to regroup, then led them northward. When they arrived at the large tree, Nagarjuna came out to greet Kapimala with joy and reverence. Nagarjuna said, "In this remote mountain, a dwelling place for wild beasts, why has such a great and venerable one come here?" Kapimala replied, "I am not great or venerable. I have come to seek the wise." Nagarjuna, reflecting silently, thought, could this venerable one be a true saint, with his dharma eye fully opened, capable of inheriting the true lineage? Kapimala, knowing his thoughts, said, "I am aware of your thoughts. All you need to do is ordain, and you need not worry whether I am a saint or not." Hearing this, Nagarjuna repented and sought forgiveness. Kapimala ordained him. One day Kapimala called Nagarjuna and said, "Today I pass on to you the great dharma treasury of the Tathagata. You must transmit it continuously and not let it be lost. Listen to this verse. The Dharma is neither hidden nor revealed. It is spoken of as the true essence. Awakening to this hidden and revealed Dharma is neither ignorance nor wisdom. After transmitting the Dharma, Kapimala demonstrated miraculous powers and then passed into nirvana. Nagarjuna and the assembly cremated his body, collected the relics, and built a stupa to honor him. 14 Nagarjuna. In the mid-6th century after the Buddha's nirvana, there lived a bodhisattva named Nagarjuna, also known as Longsheng, born into the Brahmin caste in western India. As a child, Nagarjuna was naturally intelligent. After merely hearing the Brahmins recite the 4 Vedas, he could remember both the texts and their meanings. At the age of 20, he traveled extensively across various countries to study astronomy, geography, mathematics, prophecies, and the teachings of non-Buddhist traditions. In every subject he studied, he excelled beyond others. However, through an unfortunate event, Nagarjuna realized the impermanence and suffering inherent in all phenomena, leading him to retreat into the mountains to live in seclusion. Many people sought him out to learn from him. Eventually, he met the patriarch Kapimala, who inspired him to ordain as a monk. Kapimala conferred upon him the mind seal transmission. From that point on, Nagarjuna traveled widely, preaching the Dharma, and eventually reached South India. The people of this region were devoted solely to acts of merit, and when Nagarjuna arrived to teach the essential Dharma, they said among themselves, "These merit-based deeds are the highest, and speaking of Buddha nature is something beyond comprehension." Nagarjuna responded, "If you wish to see Buddha nature, you must first let go of your arrogance. Only then can it be revealed to you." They asked him, "Is Buddha nature large or small?" Nagarjuna replied, "It is neither large nor small, not wide nor narrow, not associated with merit or retribution, and neither dies nor lives." Hearing his profound teachings, the people were overjoyed and vowed to study this path. At that moment, Nagarjuna, sitting on the Dharma seat, manifested a form resembling a full moon. Although the people heard his teachings, they could not see his physical form. Among them was a wealthy man's son named Kanadeve, who upon witnessing this, attained enlightenment. Kanadeve said to the people, "Do you understand this sign?" They replied, "We cannot discern it." Kanadeve explained, "This is a bodhisattva manifesting to illustrate Buddha nature, urging us to comprehend it clearly. The formless samadhi is like the full moon, symbolizing the vast, luminous nature of Buddha nature." As Kanadeve finished speaking, the moon disappeared and the bodhisattva reappeared, seated calmly as before, reciting a verse, "My body appears as a full moon to reveal the essence of all Buddhas." Preaching without any form, using neither sound nor color. The entire assembly, upon hearing this, attained realization and requested ordination. Nagarjuna gathered the holy monks to conduct the ordination ceremony, with Kanadeve leading the group. In a neighboring country in southern India, there were about 5,000 non-Buddhists who practiced various miraculous powers. The king and his people were devoted to these teachings, causing the Buddhist teachings to wane. Seeing this, Nagarjuna was moved, so he altered his appearance, dressed in white robes, and waited for the king's procession. Holding a flag, he walked ahead, appearing and disappearing several times. On the 7th occasion, the king, puzzled, summoned him and asked, "Who are you to dare walk before me, unable to be caught or restrained?" Nagarjuna replied, "I am a wise man who knows everything." Astonished, the king asked, "What are the devas doing now?" Nagarjuna responded, "The devas are currently fighting with the asuras." The king asked, "How do you know this?" Nagarjuna replied, "If your majesty wishes to know, you will soon see proof." Indeed, moments later, weapons and limbs fell from the sky. The king and his subjects were deeply impressed, and Nagarjuna used this opportunity to turn them back to the 3 jewels. One day, Nagarjuna called Kanadeve to him and instructed, "The great Dharma eye treasury of the Tathagata was passed from the Buddha to the patriarch Mahakasyapa, and it has been transmitted to me. Now I pass it on to you. Listen to this verse. For the sake of illuminating the hidden and the revealed, only then is the principle of liberation explained. In the Dharma, the mind is not to be grasped, neither anger nor joy should arise." After these instructions, Nagarjuna entered the samadhi of the moon wheel and, displaying miraculous powers, passed into nirvana. Nagarjuna authored many treatises to expound the teachings of the Mahayana. Madhyamaka Shastra, Middleway Treatise. 2. Shunyata Shastra, Treatise on Emptiness. 3. Dvadashanikaya Shastra, 12 Gates Treatise. 4. Mahayana Satadharma Prakasamukha Shastra. 5. Yuktasastika Shastra, Treatise on 60 Verses on Reasoning. 6. Mahayana Vimshika Shastra. 7. Ashtadasha Shunyata Shastra, 18 Emptinesses Treatise. 8. Vigrahavya Vartani Shastra. 9. Bodhisambhara Shastra. 10. Bodhicittavavarana. 11. Bodhisattva Bhumi. 12. Mahaprajnaparamata Shastra. 13. Bhavasankranti. 14. Dharmadhatu Prakarana. 15. Vaidalya Prakarana. Bodhisattva Asvaghosha ignited the lamp of Mahayana Buddhism, and it was Nagarjuna who illuminated it further and spread its teachings far and wide, making the Mahayana light eternal. Among his works, the Madhyamaka Shastra is the most renowned and continues to be translated and taught worldwide. Kanadeve. In the late 6th century after the Buddha's nirvana, there lived a bodhisattva named Kanadeve who was born into the Vatsa clan in southern India. From a young age, he was naturally intelligent and eloquent, excelling in debate. Initially, he studied the customs of his country and had a strong inclination towards performing virtuous deeds. When Patriarch Nagarjuna arrived in his country, Kanadeve sought him out to pay respects. Nagarjuna, wanting to test him, instructed his disciples to place a bowl of water at the entrance. As Kanadeve approached, he calmly placed a needle in the bowl and proceeded to meet the Patriarch. Upon meeting, they joyfully exchanged insights. During one of Nagarjuna's Dharma teachings, where he manifested the image of a full moon, Kanadeve secretly comprehended the essential teachings. Kanadeve then followed Nagarjuna and was ordained as a monk, receiving the mind seal transmission. After attaining the Dharma, he traveled widely to spread the teachings, eventually reaching the country of Kapilavastu. In this land, there was a wealthy man named Jananadada who had 2 sons. The elder was named Rahulata, and the younger, Rahulata. The father spent his days tending to his garden. One day, a strange mushroom began to grow on one of the trees in the garden. The father picked it and found it to be exceptionally delicious. However, only he and his younger son could pick and eat the mushroom, while no one else could. The father said to his son, Rahulata then recited a verse, "This tree grows a rare mushroom. I eat it with great delight. May the wise understand this cause. I vow to follow the Buddha's path." One day, Bodhisattva Deva appeared at their home, and Jananadada joyfully shared this occurrence. The Bodhisattva explained, "When you were 20 years old, you once invited a monk to your home for offerings. Although the monk had some precepts, his mind was not enlightened, and he did not fully grasp the Dharma. Nevertheless, due to his limited cultivation, he did not fall into evil paths, but instead was reborn as this tree to repay his debt to you. Since only you and your younger son sincerely offered to him, the mushroom now only appears for the 2 of you." The Bodhisattva further asked, "How old are you now?" Jananadada replied, "I am 79 years old." The Bodhisattva recited a verse, "Entering the path without understanding the principle, one must return in another life to repay the debt of faith. When you reach 81 years, this tree will no longer bear mushrooms." Upon hearing this explanation, Jananadada was filled with even greater admiration and understanding. He said, "I am old and weak. Though I wish to become a monk, I fear I may not be able to endure the path. However, my younger son is devoted to the Dharma, and I wish for him to serve you as an attendant. May you kindly accept him." The Bodhisattva happily accepted Rahulata as a disciple, ordaining him and summoning the holy monks to perform the full ordination ceremony. Kanadeve continued his journey and reached the kingdom of Balika, where the influence of non-Buddhist teachings was strong and Buddhism had faded. With great effort, he converted many non-Buddhists back to the 3 jewels, reviving the Dharma in that region. When he grew old, Kanadeve summoned Rahulata and entrusted him with the Dharma eye treasury, instructing him not to let it be lost. He then recited a verse, "In the past, I transmitted the Dharma to people," explaining the principle of liberation. In the true Dharma, there is no attainment, no beginning and no end. After giving his final instructions, Kanadeve entered meditation and passed away in a seated posture. Rahulata and the disciples built a stupa to honor and venerate him. Kanadeve was the 3rd bodhisattva to significantly advance Mahayana teachings. His notable works include 1. Shata Shastra, 100 verses. 2. Shata Shloka Shastra, 100 lines treatise. 3. Mahapurusha Shastra, Great Person Treatise. 4. Deva Bodhisattva's Treatise on the Four Doctrines of Hinayana in the Lankavatara Sutra. Deva Bodhisattva's explanation of Nirvana in the Lankavatara Sutra. Among these, the Shata Shastra and Mahapurusha Shastra are the most renowned. Rahulata. At the beginning of the 7th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Rahulata was born into a Brahmin family in Kapilavastu. From a young age, he had a deep inclination toward the Dharma. As he grew older, a peculiar event occurred in his garden where a tree sprouted mushrooms. When Patriarch Deva explained the karmic causes behind this phenomenon, Rahulata was inspired to renounce the world and become a monk. After receiving the Mind Seal transmission, he led his disciples on a journey to spread the teachings among the people. Their travels eventually brought them to the southern city of Shravasti, where they encountered the Golden Water River. Rahulata said to his disciples, "Do you see the reflections of the 5 Buddhas beneath the river's surface? I scooped some water into my bowl and tasted it. It had a unique flavor. If we follow this river upstream for about 500 miles, we will meet a great sage named Sanghanandi." He then led the group along the riverbank, and sure enough, they found Sanghanandi meditating inside a stone hut. They waited and observed him until Sanghanandi emerged from his meditation after 7 days. Rahulata asked Sanghanandi, "Is your body in meditation or is your mind in meditation?" Sanghanandi replied, "Both body and mind are in meditation." Rahulata continued, "If both body and mind are in meditation, how can there be entry and exit?" Sanghanandi responded, "Though there is entry and exit, the nature of meditation is not lost, like gold in a well. Whether the gold is inside or outside the well, its essence remains undisturbed." Rahulata then asked, "If the gold is in the well and then exits, what is it that enters and exits?" Sanghanandi was silent. Rahulata said, "You acknowledge that the gold enters and exits, yet its essence remains unchanged." Sanghanandi replied, "If the gold is in the well, then it cannot exit as something else. If the gold exits, then what remains in the well is not gold. If the gold is inside the well, then what exits is not the same as what remains." Rahulata countered, "This logic does not hold." Sanghanandi conceded, "Indeed, the logic is not sound." Rahulata declared, "Though my reasoning prevails, in truth, the Dharma transcends self and non-self." Sanghanandi humbly acknowledged, "Your reasoning prevails because you have transcended self and non-self." Rahulata continued, "Transcending self and non-self reveals the true nature of things." Sanghanandi asked, "Whom do you follow as your teacher to attain such understanding?" Rahulata responded, "My teacher is Bodhisattva Kanadeve, who has attained this realization." Sanghanandi praised him, saying, "I bow in reverence to Kanadeve, who has guided you to this understanding. I wish to serve you as my teacher." Rahulata replied, "You must first see the true nature of things before you can serve me. If you seek to rely on me, know that I am not to be relied upon." Upon hearing this, Sanghanandi experienced a deep awakening and recited a verse. "The 3 realms are illuminated by one light. Its radiance reflects upon me. The 10 directions are all bright and clear, like the sun abiding in the sky." After reciting this verse, Sanghanandi bowed deeply and requested ordination from Rahulata. However, Rahulata told him, "Your mind is already free and does not depend on me. There is no need to rely on anyone to attain liberation." One day, Rahulata called Sanghanandi and said, "I am old now and will not remain in this world much longer. I will entrust the Dharma treasury of the Tathagata to you. Listen to my verse. In the true Dharma, there is no attainment. There is nothing to grasp or abandon. The Dharma is beyond existence and non-existence. From where do inner and outer arise?" After hearing the verse, Sanghanandi became even more reverent and recited a verse in praise. "How fortunate to meet the great sage, whose mind shines like the sun and moon. Its light illuminates the world and all darkness is dispelled." Rahulata then peacefully passed away while seated on his meditation seat. The fourfold assembly of disciples built a stupa to honor and venerate him. 17. Sanghanandi. In the middle of the 7th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Sanghanandi was born as a prince, the son of King Precious Adornments in the city of Shravasti. From an early age, Sanghanandi was able to speak, often discussing matters related to the Dharma. At the age of 7, he grew weary of worldly pleasures and requested to renounce the world. He composed a verse to seek permission from his parents. "I bow to my kind father. I prostrate before my dear mother. Now I wish to renounce the world. Please show mercy and grant me this." His parents tried to dissuade him but were unable to change his mind. Finally, seeing the strength of his resolve, they allowed him to become a monk under the condition that he reside in a private residence within the royal palace. The king invited the monk Shenlita to teach him the Dharma, and from that time on, Sanghanandi received the Dharma name of Sanghanandi. He practiced within the palace for 9 years before receiving full ordination. One day, Sanghanandi reflected, "I have received full ordination, yet I am still living in this worldly house." One afternoon, as the sky cleared and the clouds parted, he saw a straight path leading to a distant green mountain. He immediately set off in that direction, reaching the foot of the mountain before nightfall. He found a stone hut and began meditating there. Sanghanandi was 26 years old at the time. The next morning, the king discovered that the prince was missing and sent people to search for him everywhere, but to no avail. Frustrated, the king banished Shenlita from the city. Sanghanandi meditated in the mountain for 10 years until he encountered Patriarch Rahulata, who transmitted the true Dharma to him. After receiving the Dharma, Sanghanandi led his disciples on a journey to spread the teachings and benefit all beings. One day, Sanghanandi told his disciples, "My teacher Rahulata often said that in the land of Magadha, a sage named Gayasata will arise to continue the transmission of the Dharma. Now we shall go to that country to find him." He then led his disciples to Magadha. As they traveled through the land, a refreshing breeze blew in from the west, bringing relief to all. Sanghanandi said, "This is the wind of virtue. 3,000 miles to the west, we will meet a sage." They eventually reached a mountain with 5 colored clouds hovering over its peak. Sanghanandi said, "The purple clouds on the peak indicate the presence of a sage." When they reached the summit, they found a small thatched hut by the mountainside. A young boy holding a round mirror approached and bowed to Sanghanandi. Sanghanandi asked, "How old are you?" The boy replied, 100 years old. Sanghanandi asked, "You are still a child. How can you be 100 years old?" The boy answered, "I don't understand why, but I am indeed 100 years old." Sanghanandi continued, "Do you have good roots in the Dharma?" The boy responded with a verse, "The Buddhas have a great round mirror, inside and out. There is no stain. 2 people both see clearly. Heart and mind are one and the same." The boy's parents, seeing how he responded in line with the Dharma, agreed to let him become Sanghanandi's attendant. Sanghanandi took the boy back to the monastery, shaved his head, and ordained him, giving him the Dharma name Gayasata. One day the wind rang the bell hanging in the Buddha hall. Sanghanandi asked Gayasata, "Is it the bell that rings, or is it the wind that rings?" Gayasata replied, "It is neither the bell nor the wind that rings. It is my mind that rings." Sanghanandi asked, "What is your mind?" Gayasata responded, "It is completely still." Sanghanandi praised him, saying, "You have comprehended the Buddha's truth well. You shall inherit the Dharma and continue the path after me. There is no one else but you." Sanghanandi then recited a verse, "The ground of the mind is inherently unborn. From conditions it arises. Seeds and conditions do not obstruct each other. Flowers and fruits are also like this." After reciting the verse, Sanghanandi grasped a tree branch and passed away. His disciples said, "Our teacher passed away beneath the shade of this tree, a sign that he will continue to provide shelter for future generations." They then performed the cremation ceremony at that spot. Gayasata. In the late 7th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Gayasata was born into the Uttara clan in the country of Magadha. His father was known as Tiankai and his mother was named Fangsheng. One night, while Lady Fangsheng was pregnant, she dreamt of someone holding a precious mirror who said to her, "This is the child of the Buddha." Upon awakening, she felt a sense of lightness and serenity, unlike anything she had ever experienced before. The house was filled with a strange fragrance and beams of radiant light appeared. 7 days later, she gave birth to Gayasata, whose body was as clear as crystal. He preferred solitude and often spoke words of profound wisdom. His parents lived on Mount Baulaka, and after his birth, a purple cloud constantly hovered above their house. Seeing this auspicious sign, Patriarch Sanghanandi came to meet Gayasata, and from then on, Gayasata became his disciple. Later, Gayasata received the transmission of the mind seal from the Patriarch, and led his disciples on a journey to spread the Dharma, benefiting countless beings. As he grew older, he traveled to the country of Uachi. In this land, there was a 30-year-old Brahmin named Kumarata, who followed an external path based on naturalism. He had a dog that, after eating, would always lie down under a curtain in the hallway. Even when it rained and the dog got wet, it would not leave its spot. The family, concerned about the dog's comfort, would move it elsewhere, but it would always return to the same place. Kumarata found this behavior puzzling and asked his teacher about it, but received no satisfactory explanation. He hoped to one day meet a virtuous and wise spiritual teacher who could resolve his doubts. As Gayasata and his disciples approached Kumarata's house, they sensed a great spiritual energy. Gayasata paused and said to his disciples, "If this energy forms a ring like an earring, it indicates the presence of a bodhisattva nearby. Now, seeing this energy, there must be a sage close by." They continued until a Brahmin approached and asked one of the attendants, "Who is this master?" The attendant replied, "This is Gayasata, a teacher of the Dharma." The Brahmin hurried home and shut the door. Gayasata followed and knocked on the door, to which the person inside responded, "There is no one home." Gayasata then asked, "Who is the one saying there is no one?" Kumarata, intrigued by these words and suspecting that a great teacher had arrived, opened the door. Seeing Gayasata, he greeted him and invited him to sit in the center seat, then presented his question about the dog. Gayasata explained, "This dog is actually your father. Due to some karmic debts, he was reborn as an animal. In the past, your father buried a pot filled with gold coins under the curtain, but he died before he could tell you about it. Clinging to this treasure, he was reborn as a dog to guard it. If you dig up the pot, the dog will leave." Kumarata immediately ordered the spot where the dog lay to be dug up, and indeed, they found a pot of gold just as Gayasata had described. Overwhelmed with respect and gratitude, Kumarata vowed to renounce the world. Gayasata joyfully accepted him as a disciple, performed the ordination ceremony, and appointed him as his attendant. Sensing that his time was near, Gayasata called Kumarata and gave him the following instructions. Long ago, the Buddha transmitted the great Dharma treasury to the Patriarch Mahakasyapa, who passed it down through the lineage until it reached me. Now I pass it on to you. Listen to my verse. With seeds in the mind's soil, causes and conditions make the sprout grow. In facing these conditions, there is no obstruction. Though it arises, it does not arise. Kumarata respectfully received these teachings, bowed, and took them to heart. Gayasata then demonstrated 18 miraculous powers before peacefully passing into nirvana. His disciples cremated his body, collected his relics, and built a stupa to honor and venerate him. 19. Kumarata. In the early 8th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Kumarata was born into a Brahmin family in the country of Uachi. His family was once wealthy, but his father, due to his greed, became miserly and hoarded his wealth. After the incident involving the dog lying outside the curtain and the resolution provided by the Patriarch Gayasata, Kumarata developed a deep faith in Buddhism, renounced the world, and received full ordination. After receiving the mind transmission from the Patriarch Gayasata, Kumarata traveled far and wide to spread the Dharma and benefit sentient beings. He journeyed to central India, where he encountered a traveler named Shayadeva who came to pay his respects. Shayadeva asked, "Both my parents are devout Buddhists who practice according to the Dharma, yet they suffer from numerous illnesses, and everything they do ends in failure. On the other hand, our neighbor is a cruel person who kills and commits many wrongdoings, yet he is healthy and everything he does is successful. Doesn't this contradict the principle of karma and retribution? I have serious doubts about this and hope you can clarify." Kumarata replied, "The Buddha taught that karmic retribution can span 3 lifetimes. Good deeds from a previous life may result in favorable outcomes in the current life. Even if a person commits bad deeds now, these bad deeds will bear fruit in a future life. Similarly, Someone who does good deeds in this life but does not see immediate benefits may be suffering from the effects of previous bad karma, which is stronger. If one becomes disheartened and turns to evil because they do not see immediate rewards, they will only sink deeper into suffering in future lives. Conversely, if one experiences good results in this life and continues to do good, they will progress further on the path of goodness. There are also cases where a person does good deeds for half of their life, but then turns to evil. They may enjoy the fruits of their good deeds in the first half of their life, but suffer the consequences of their bad deeds in the second half. The circumstances of your parents and neighbors are a result of karma from past lives manifesting in the present, and you cannot judge it solely by the events of this lifetime. Shyadeva's doubts were dispelled by this explanation. Kumarata continued, although you now understand the principle of karma across 3 lifetimes, you should also know that karma arises from delusion, which in turn comes from consciousness, and consciousness is based on ignorance. But the mind itself is inherently pure, neither arising nor ceasing, neither creating nor suffering retribution, neither superior nor inferior, tranquil and perfectly aware. If you can enter this Dharma gate, you will be on par with the Buddhas, and all good, evil, conditioned and unconditioned things will seem as insubstantial as a dream or an illusion. Upon hearing this, Shyadev experienced a sudden awakening to his past life's wisdom and requested ordination. Kumarata asked, "Where are you from? Are your parents still alive? If you are sincere in seeking the way, you should return home to obtain their permission, and then you may come back." Shayadeva replied, "I am from North India, over 3,000 miles away. I cannot return. I humbly ask that you come to my homeland, where my family can make offerings to you, and I may receive ordination." Kumarata agreed, and they traveled to North India together. Upon arriving at Shyadeva's home, he obtained his parents' permission to ordain. Kumarata conducted the ordination ceremony and conferred full monastic precepts on Shyadev at an ancient stupa in his hometown. One day, Kumarata called Shyadev and instructed him, "Long ago, the Buddha prophesied that you would become the 20th patriarch. Now I pass the great Dharma treasury to you. You must preserve and transmit it. Listen to my verse. The nature above is originally unborn. Words are spoken only for those who seek. In the Dharma nothing is gained, so why concern yourself with solving or not solving?" Kumarata continued, "This verse contains profound meaning, spoken by the Tathagata upon realizing the pure nature. You must uphold it." Shyadev respectfully bowed and accepted the teaching. Kumarata then sat on his seat, his hands forming a lotus shape, and radiated a bright light that illuminated the assembly before quietly entering nirvana. His disciples built a stupa to honor his remains. 20 Jayata. In the mid-8th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Jayata, who hailed from northern India, had a natural affinity for the Dharma and a deep understanding of its principles. While traveling through central India, he encountered the patriarch Kumarata, who helped resolve his doubts, leading Jayata to develop the aspiration to renounce the world and become a monk. After receiving the mind transmission, he led his disciples to spread the Dharma across various countries, eventually arriving in the city of Rajagriha. At that time, there was a large assembly of monks in the city studying the Dharma. Upon hearing of Jayata's arrival, they eagerly came to meet him. Leading them was a monk named Vasubandhu, who practiced asceticism with great diligence. He never lay down day or night, worshipped 6 times a day, wore patched robes, ate only 1 meal a day, and maintained a life of simplicity without desire. Because of this, the disciples held him in high regard. Jayata addressed his followers asking, "Do you think this ascetic, Vasubandhu, can attain Buddhahood?" They replied, "With his rigorous practice, he surely will." Jayata responded, "He is still far from the way. Even if he practices asceticism for many lifetimes, it only strengthens the roots of delusion and cannot lead to enlightenment." The monks questioned him, "What dharma do you possess that you dare to criticize our teacher?" Jayata replied, "I neither seek the way nor am I deluded. I do not worship the Buddha, nor do I disrespect him. I neither sit forever, nor am I lazy. I neither know contentment, nor do I crave." Upon hearing this, Vasubandhu joyfully recited a verse of praise. "I bow to the great Samadhi. not seeking the Buddha's path, not worshipping nor disrespecting. My mind remains undisturbed, not sitting nor idle. I simply eat without desire. Though slow, I'm not delayed. Though quick, I'm not rushed. Today I meet the Supreme and humbly follow the Buddha's teachings." Jayata then told his followers, "None of you can match this ascetic's practice." His rigorous training in previous lives led him to this point. Earlier, I criticized him because I saw his sincere but strained effort, fearing that, like a taut string, it might snap. I wanted him to advance to the state of non-attainment and rest in the land of peace and joy. He then called Vasubandhu and asked, "When I spoke against your views, did your mind remain undisturbed?" Vasubandhu replied, "My mind did not waver. I remember in my past 7 lives, I was born in the Pure Land and I was devoted to the teachings of the wise master Moonlight. He once told me, if you meet a true teacher, do not let your mind waver." At that time, I was 80 years old and could only walk with the help of a cane. When I went to worship the Bodhisattva Great Radiance at the monastery, I was scolded by Master Moonlight upon my return. Although I believed I had done nothing wrong, Master Moonlight explained that I had made the mistake of placing my cane against the painted image of the Buddha on the wall. Because of that, I regressed from my position. Since then, I have always accepted any advice with humility, even insults as mere passing winds. How could I be upset by your righteous words today? I humbly ask you, with your great compassion, to guide me on the true path." Jayata then imparted the teachings, saying, "The great Dharma treasury of the Tathagata is now entrusted to you. You must preserve it and transmit it without interruption. Listen to my verse. Speech in accord with non-birth, in harmony with the nature of the Dharma realm. If you can understand this, you will penetrate the ultimate truth of phenomena." Vasubandhu respectfully bowed and accepted the teachings. Jayata then quietly entered nirvana while sitting on his seat. His disciples conducted the cremation and enshrined his relics in a stupa for veneration. Vasubandhu, in the late 8th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Vasubandhu was born into the Vaisakha family in the city of Rajagriha. His father, Gwangkai, and his mother, Niyama, were a wealthy couple but had no children. They both went to worship at a Buddha stupa north of Rajagriha to pray for a child. Subsequently, Niyama dreamt of swallowing 2 pearls, one bright and one dark. Soon after, she realized she was pregnant. One day, an arahant named Xianzong visited their home. Guangchai greeted him with respect, but when Niyama came to pay her respects, the arahant avoided her, bowing in return. Guangchai was puzzled and asked, "Why did you accept my bow but avoid my wife's, even though she is a woman?" Xianzong replied, "I accepted your bow because you are an ordinary person, but your wife is carrying a bodhisattva who is destined to become a great dharma vessel. That is why I avoided her bow, not out of disrespect for women, but out of reverence for the unborn bodhisattva." Guangchai apologized and said, "You are a saint who knows the future." Indeed, Niyama later gave birth to twin sons. The elder son was named Vasubandhu. From a young age, Vasubandhu exhibited extraordinary intelligence and resolve. At 15, he requested to become a monk under the Arahant Guangdu and received his ordination from the Bodhisattva Papala. He admired the ascetic practices of the Patriarch Mahakasyapa and adopted similar practices. When he met the Patriarch Jayata, he was inspired to great wisdom and received the Dharma transmission. He then led his disciples to spread the teachings widely, eventually arriving in the kingdom of Nadia. The king of Nadia, named Everfree, had 2 sons. The elder Mahala was 40 years old and the younger Manola was 30. When Vasubandhu arrived in Nadia, the king invited him to the palace for offerings. The king asked, "Is the culture of my kingdom inferior to the refined culture of Rajagriha?" Vasubandhu replied, "In the past, Rajagriha was blessed with the presence of 3 Buddhas, but in this kingdom, there are currently 2 virtuous individuals who are the fruits of such blessings." The king asked, "Who are these 2 virtuous individuals?" Vasubandhu answered, "The Buddha once predicted, nearly 1,000 years after my nirvana, a great being with immense spiritual power will emerge in Nadia named Manola, who is your younger son. As for the other, though my virtue is slight, I am responsible for this role." The king, overjoyed, summoned Prince Manola and requested Vasubandhu to ordain him. Vasubandhu said, If I do not become his teacher, no one else will be able to guide him." Vasubandhu then gathered the holy assembly in the palace to ordain Manola and bestow upon him the full monastic precepts. Manola was delighted to receive the precepts and embraced the Dharma. Later, Vasubandhu took Manola to other kingdoms to spread the teachings. One day, Vasubandhu called Manola to him and said, "The great Dharma treasury of the Tathagata is now entrusted to you. You must preserve and transmit it. Listen to my verse. Bubbles and illusions are unimpeded. Why do you not realize this? Attain the Dharma within, neither ancient nor modern." After transmitting the Dharma, Vasubandhu, while seated on his throne, suddenly rose into the air and remained suspended. Before full assembly, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen knelt and requested, "We wish to honor your relics. Please allow us to cremate your body and collect the relics." Vasubandhu then descended and returned to his seat. The assembly performed the cremation, gathered his relics, and enshrined them in a stupa for veneration. 22. Manorhita. In the early 9th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Manorhita was born into the Kshatriya caste in the kingdom of Nagadha, where his father, King Everfree, ruled. He was the king's third son, and at his birth, many auspicious signs appeared, prompting the king not to bind him to worldly affairs. When Manorhita met the patriarch Vasubandhu at the age of 30, his father granted him permission to renounce the world and become a monk. Later, Manorhita received the transmission of the Dharma from Vasubandhu. Manorhita then traveled to western India to spread the teachings. The king of that region, named Kudama and titled Dharmaraja, was a devout follower of Buddhism and diligently practiced the Dharma for 7 years at the Dragon Palace. One day, a mysterious greenish-blue stupa, about 1.25 meters tall, suddenly appeared at the spot where the king was practicing. The king attempted to lift the stupa to place it on an altar, but it would not budge. Even the royal guards could not move it despite their combined efforts. Finally, the king organized a great assembly, summoning all the strongmen, monks, Brahmins, and conjurers to determine the reason for the stupa's appearance and how to move it. Manorhita was also present at this assembly. First, the strongmen tried to lift the stupa, but could not. Next, the conjurers recited their spells, but they too were powerless. Finally, Manorhita stepped forward and explained, "This stupa was created by King Ashoka to enshrine the Buddha's relics. It is adorned on all 4 sides with depictions of the Bodhisattva's previous lives as Shakyamuni Buddha. Today, it has appeared here due to your great merit, O king." After speaking, Manorhita easily lifted the stupa and placed it on the altar. The king and all present were filled with reverence. The king then asked, "Please teach us the Buddhist practices we should follow." Manorhita replied, "To practice Buddhism, you must discard 3 things and cultivate 7 qualities." The king inquired, "What are the 3 things to discard and the 7 qualities to cultivate?" Manorhita answered, "You must discard greed, anger, and ignorance. The 7 qualities to cultivate are 1. Great compassion, 2. Joy, 3. Selflessness, 4. Courage, 5. Benefiting others, 6. Conquering demons, and 7. Non-attachment." King Dharmaraj, upon hearing this, was deeply moved and lamented that he had understood these truths too late. He reflected, "It is rare to meet a truly devoted teacher. The pleasures of life are fleeting." The king then summoned his crown prince, entrusted him with the kingdom, and requested to renounce the world and follow Manorhita in the practice of the Dharma. Manorhita gathered the holy assembly in the royal palace, conducted the ordination ceremony, and transmitted the full monastic precepts to the king. Not long after renouncing the world, King Dharmaraja attained enlightenment. Manorhita instructed Dharmaraja to remain in the kingdom to continue teaching while he traveled to Yuji to find a successor. Accompanied by his monks, Manorhita arrived in Yuji, where he was warmly received by King Bao Yin and the monk Haklena, who invited him to the inner palace. Haklena immediately presented a query. "Venerable sir, I have a young disciple named Dragon Son who is extraordinarily intelligent. I have tried to investigate his past lives in meditation but have found no clues. Could you kindly clarify this for me?" Manorhita asked, "How many lifetimes can you see in meditation?" Haklena replied, "I can see only 3 lifetimes." Manorhita explained, "In his 5th lifetime, your disciple was born into a wealthy Brahmin family in the Kingdom of Joy. At that time, a new temple in the kingdom had just completed its great bell. The Brahmin's son crafted a mallet from sandalwood and offered it to the temple. The sound of the bell, struck with this mallet, awakened many. Because of this merit, he is now reborn with great intelligence. Haklena then asked, I also have a karmic connection with a flock of cranes that often follow me. Could you explain this? Manorhita replied, in your fourth lifetime, you were a virtuous monk with 500 disciples. Whenever the Dragon King invited you to a meal, you would go alone, knowing that your disciples were not yet virtuous enough to receive such offerings. However, your disciples, dissatisfied, complained, our teacher preaches equality in food and dharma, yet he goes alone to receive offerings. Subsequently, you allowed them to accompany you. But because they were more focused on food than dharma, they were reborn as birds after their deaths. These birds, having once been your disciples, are now drawn to you due to the past life connection. Haklena, deeply moved, asked, what should I do to help them regain human form? Manorhita replied, I possess the supreme dharma treasure, the Tathagata's treasury, which was passed down from the Buddha to Mahakasyapa and eventually to me. Now, I will transmit it to you. Listen to my verse. The mind follows myriad conditions. The place of transformation is truly profound. In the flow, realize the nature, no joy, no sorrow. Haklena joyfully accepted the teaching and vowed to practice it. After transmitting the Dharma, Manorhita quietly entered nirvana while seated. His disciples conducted his cremation and collected his relics to enshrine in a stupa. Haklena. In the mid-9th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Haklena was born into a Brahmin family in the kingdom of Uachi. His father was named Shantivarman and his mother was named Golden Light Kim Kwang. Shantivarman was an elderly man who had no children. One day, he went to the Kim Trang shrine, which honored the 7 Buddhas and offered incense, praying for a child. Later, Kim Kwang dreamed of a deity standing atop Mount Sumeru, holding a jeweled ring, who told her, this ring represents your child who will bring great merit. Upon waking, she realized she was pregnant. When Haklena was 7 years old, he wandered into a village and saw a shrine where people frequently sacrificed animals. He entered the shrine and rebuked the spirit, saying, you deceive the people with talk of fortune and misfortune, causing them to waste their resources and take the lives of many innocent creatures. After his rebuke, the shrine collapsed. The villagers, witnessing this, began calling him the Holy Child. At 20, Haklena renounced the world and became a monk, practicing in seclusion in a forest for 9 years. His only companions were a flock of cranes, and he devoted himself to reciting the great Prajnaparamita Sutra. At 30, he encountered the patriarch Manorhita, who transmitted the mind seal to him. Haklena led his disciples on a journey to spread the Dharma throughout central India. The king of this region, named Vibhishana, was a devout follower of Buddhism and invited Haklena to the palace to teach the Dharma. The king was greatly pleased with his teachings. Haklena's most outstanding disciple was named Dragon Son, Long Tu, who was incredibly intelligent but had a short lifespan. After Dragon Son passed away, his parents and brother, Lion Sutu, came to conduct the cremation, but they could not move the coffin. Perplexed, Lion asked Haklena, why can't we lift the coffin despite all our efforts? Haklena replied, the fault lies with you. Lion asked, what fault have I committed? Please enlighten me, Venerable One. Haklena explained, in the past, when you followed the Brahmin way, your brother became a monk and the two of you grew distant. For 2 years, your brother longed to perform a meritorious act on your behalf and asked his teacher to create a Buddha statue. However, the statue remained incomplete for a long time. Out of disdain, you threw the statue to the ground. Now if you return home and place the statue on an altar, the coffin will be movable. Lion followed Haklena's instructions, and indeed, the coffin was easily moved. Afterwards, Lion's teacher passed away. Reflecting on Haklena's words, Lion felt sorrowful and eventually asked to become a monk and be Haklena's disciple. Lion asked, Master, I wish to focus my mind on seeking the way. How should I do this? Haklena responded, there's no place to focus the mind. Lion then asked, if there is no focus, how can I perform Buddha's work? Haklena replied, if you focus, it is not true merit. If you do nothing, that is Buddha's work. As the sutra says, I perform meritorious deeds, yet there is no I doing them. Upon hearing this, Lion attained the wisdom of the Buddha. Haklena pointed to the northeast and asked, "What do you see?" Lion answered, "I see." Haklena asked, "What do you see?" Lion replied, "I see white vapor rising like a halo, covering the sky and earth. There are also 5 black streaks shooting up like ladders toward Trayastrimsa heaven." Haklena asked, "Do you understand the omen?" Lion answered, "I do not. Please explain it to me." Haklena said, 50 years after my passing, disaster will arise in North India. You should be aware of this." Lion then expressed his desire to travel, asking for guidance. Haklena told him, "I am now old, and my nirvana is approaching. I entrust you with the Tathagata's treasury of the eye of the true Dharma. Go to another country, but know that it is fraught with dangers that may affect you. Be cautious and pass on the teachings without interruption. Listen to my verse. When you realize the nature of the mind, you can speak of the inconceivable. Clearly, there is nothing to attain. When attained, there is no need to know." After transmitting the Dharma, Haklena ascended into the sky, performing 18 miraculous displays, then returned to his seat and peacefully entered nirvana. 24 Aryasimha. In the late 9th century after the Buddha's nirvana, Aryasimha was born into a Brahmin family in central India. As a child, he was extremely intelligent and had exceptional debating skills. His younger brother Long Tzu was equally gifted. Initially, Aryasimha studied under a Brahmin teacher, while his brother renounced the world to become a Buddhist monk. Upon Long Tzu's passing, Aryasimha encountered the patriarch Haklena, who inspired him to turn towards Buddhism, where he then received teachings from Haklena. Before Haklena's passing, he transmitted the Dharma to Aryasimha, who subsequently traveled to the Khotan region to spread the teachings. In Khotan, there had been a monk named Balaka who specialized in Theravada meditation practices. After Balaka's passing, his disciples divided into 5 sects. 1. Meditation sect, 2. Insight sect, 3. Form sect, 4. Formlessness sect, and 5. Silent speech sect. These sects often quarreled among themselves. Aryasimha arrived and used his exceptional debating skills to resolve the disputes of 4 of the sects. However, the head of the meditation sect, Dharmadatta, grew angry upon hearing this and went to challenge Aryasimha. Upon meeting Aryasimha, Dharmadatta said, "I have come to engage in debate." Aryasimha responded, "If you are truly practicing meditation, why have you come here? If you have indeed come here, it means you are not practicing meditation." Dharmadatta replied, "Though I am here, my mind remains undisturbed. Meditation is not bound by location." Aryasimha questioned further, "If you have come here, then your practice has also come. If meditation is not bound by location, how can it be practiced by people?" Dharmadatta answered, "It is not that people practice meditation, but rather that meditation practices people. Although I am physically here, my meditation practice remains uninterrupted." Aryasimha continued, "If people do not practice meditation, but meditation practices people, then when you move, who is being practiced?" Dharmadatta likened meditation to a clear pearl that is unaffected inside and out. Aryasimha countered, "If meditation is like a clear pearl, you, Dharmadatta, cannot be compared to such a pearl." Dharmadatta replied, "The pearl shines clearly inside and out, just as my mind remains undisturbed." Aryasimha responded, "The pearl has no inside or outside. How can you claim to practice meditation? An impure thing may not move, but that doesn't mean it is pure meditation." Realizing his argument was flawed, Dharmadatta was humbled and said, "My understanding of the way is still shallow. Without your guidance, Venerable One, how could I have realized the truth? Please accept me as your disciple." Aryasimha then taught, "The meditation of the Buddhas is without any attainment. The way of the Buddhas has no realization. Without attainment and realization, one experiences true liberation. Repaying karma with karmic results is the way of the world. In this way of true liberation, it is not so. If you wish to practice meditation, do so in this manner." Dharmadatta happily accepted these teachings. One day, a nobleman brought his son Sudatta to meet Aryasimha. The nobleman said, "My son, Sudatta, is now 20 years old, but his left hand has been clenched since birth and has never opened. Please, Venerable One, explain the cause of this." Aryasimha looked directly at Sudatta and then extended his hand, saying, "Return the pearl to me." Sudatta immediately opened his hand and offered a pearl to Aryasimha. The nobleman and others present were amazed. Aryasimha explained. In a past life, I was a monk who was often invited to recite sutras in the palace of the Dragon King. Sudatta, then named Bhikshu Basha, was my attendant. After a recitation, the Dragon King gifted me a pearl, which I entrusted to Bhikshu Basha for safekeeping. I later passed away and was reborn here. Due to the unresolved karmic bond between us, we have met again in this life. The nobleman, hearing the past life story of his son, was overjoyed and allowed Sudatta to become Aryasimha's disciple. Aryasimha combined the names of Sudatta's past and present lives, naming him Basha Sudatta. He then called a gathering of the Sangha to perform the ordination ceremony. Later, Aryasimha told Basha Sudatta, "This land is soon to experience a great calamity. Although I am old and have no desire to flee, I must entrust you with the treasury of the true Dharma that the Tathagata passed down to me. Take it and leave this place to spread the teachings. If people doubt you, show them my monk's robe as proof. Now listen to my verse. When you speak of insight, know that insight is also mind. This very mind is insight, and insight is here and now." Basha Sudatta accepted the teachings and immediately departed for another land. At that time in Khotan, 2 heretics skilled in magic plotted to assassinate the king. Fearing discovery, they disguised themselves as monks to carry out their plot. However, they were captured, and the plot was uncovered. King Dilaraksha, enraged, ordered the destruction of temples and the imprisonment of monks. The king confronted Aryasimha, demanding, "Have you realized the truth of non-attachment?" Aryasimha replied, "I have." The king continued, "If you have realized it, do you still fear life and death?" Aryasimha responded, "Having transcended life and death, I have no fear." The king asked, "If you are unafraid, will you give me your head?" Aryasimha replied, "This body is not mine, how much less is this head?" The king then struck off Aryasimha's head. From his neck spouted a white liquid that rose a meter high, while the king's right arm fell off. 7 days later, the king died. The karmic connection between Aryasimha and the king is detailed in the text Sacred Residences in the Jewel Forest Chronicles. After the king's death, Crown Prince Pratibhan crowned himself king. He arranged for his father's funeral, invited monks to perform rituals of repentance, and ordered the construction of a stupa to enshrine Aryasimha's relics.